All right, let's take a look at a really cool example of a flow screen component. We're going to look at a data table. And this right here is a flow screen running on Spring 18. And what you've got right here, this part right here, this is the data table. And this data table is a Lightning-based component. So all the logic that is involved in here is packed into this component. And we have got it now working as a flow screen component, which means you can basically install this into your org and drag it into your flow screens. And in this particular example, we're simulating a bank process called closed credit account. Notice that we've selected two accounts here, numbers 36, 204. Notice down here we've got 36 and 204. I'm going to click next and they're going to close. And that's really cool. Two things actually happened there. In addition to the data table flow screen component, there was also a flow action component called update screen under the covers that took care of this smart update. But that's a story for a different video. Let's talk about data table. Let's take a look at the flow that we just saw. The screen with the data tables right here, and if we double click it, you can see that it's right here as a flow screen component, which is a Lightning component that's been optimized to run with Lightning Flow. And here are the pieces of information that I passed in to the data table. And basically, it's kind of divided into two groups. There's all of the column information that's going to determine what columns are visible, and then there's the input data itself. So you can see here that I'm passing all the credit cards. So I'm basically passing a collection of S objects, a collection S object variable, and I'm passing that into the data table. And right now you actually have to open up the data table and set the object type of the credit of what you're passing in. And we'll get back to that in a minute. That's unfortunate, because what we really want is we want to be able to use this component without having to open it up, so that people who know nothing about code can use it. We're not quite there in Spring 18 with this component, but you can still use it. You just have to make that one modification under the hood. And then for each of these columns, you've got the label that's going to be visible, the object field. So since we're working with credit cards, what we're dealing with is basically I think it's called custom debit card _ C, and these are the names of the fields that are on it that we are pulling off. And then the type is important because the data table is smart enough to sort of provide type specific formatting. All right, so if you're kind of wondering what's going on here and why you can pick a Lightning component and how this works, then check out one of our intro videos on flow screen components, and you can learn more about that. And then as far as the output information, there's really only one thing that matters in the output, and that's selected rows. And that's going to also be a collection of a particular S object. So the first one was all credit cards, and then this is selected credit cards. So, and this allows the user to select one or two or n different rows of data. And once those selected rows are given to the flow, you can see that here I'm going to loop over those selected rows, and that's probably going to be 99% of the time what you want to do after you collect selected rows from a data table. And in this case, we iterate over them. And if we can pop in here and take a look, there are the selected credit cards we're iterating over, and each is temporarily stored in this variable called custom card. And then we go and we close it, and we update it, and then we do a screen refresh using the flow action component, and then we come back. And let's take a look under the covers now for those who are interested in either seeing Datatable, modifying it perhaps. So here in the component, we have the most important attributes are the ones that we just talked about. My data, which is essentially the full set that's passed in, and then selected rows, which is the subset that's passed out. And here's where my data is basically exposed to the flow attribute list as input data. And if we go back here, so here we have a list of columns, and so that list is put together here when the component initializes. This is a sort of brute force. Actually, you don't even need this foo anymore. This is sort of a brute force approach. We're passing in, three values, each strings, passing them in, and then packing them into this columns data structure. And at least right now, that's the best we got in terms of streamlining it. But although it's a little manual, it does allow the flow to control the label and the flow to control the field name, and that's really huge. And then here's the logic for getting the selected rows. It's actually quite simple. When the user selects some rows, it generates an event, and that gets stored here, and then we copy that into the official selected rows attribute, and that's right back up here. And so that's how the information comes out into flow. There's an awful lot of the data table control that is not exposed to flow here. For example, we haven't added the logic that would make columns to sort when you click on the header. But we'll keep adding functionality. Hopefully, the community will keep adding functionality, and we will continue to expose more and more functionality of Datatable, a very powerful new tool for Lightning Flow.